Hey there everyone, this is Reladox and welcome back to the tower. So we're going to do something a little different this week. I did a poll on the channel about a week back asking if anyone would be interested in seeing me record my next tournament. And everyone who responded to that poll said yes. So I recorded my last tournament. I think I'm just going to kind of go through it, give some commentary on what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. I know there's a few other channels out there that record gameplay of their tournaments and they've made videos on their strategies and stuff, but I noticed that a pretty big majority of them are either doing an EHP build or a Orb Devo slash Blender build. So I figured it might be interesting for people to see what it looks like when you start transitioning over to more of a hybrid slash glass cannon build, which is what I run for tournaments, by the way. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of a picture of what it looks like when you start transitioning over to smart missiles for damage instead of orbs and thorns damage. Another thing I'm doing in this video is I realized that a lot of players who are a little bit earlier in the game probably don't know exactly what kind of a difference they can expect a permanent uptime Chrono Field to make. And to be honest, neither do I, because I've just had Chrono Field turned on for several months at this point, and I was kind of curious myself about how much more difficult Legend League tournaments would be if I didn't have Chrono Field on. So for this video, I decided to do two tournament runs. One with my normal build with all my ultimate weapons turned on, and then one with Chrono Field off, just so I can compare the two runs side by side and see what Chrono Field is actually doing for me. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. So right off the bat, I start my tournaments by upgrading enemy level skips. I'll usually just dump all my cash into these until the enemies start doing some serious damage to me. I also normally only upgrade enemy health level skips, since by the time I'm getting towards the end of the tournament run, any enemies that hit me are going to be one-shotting me, but I wasn't sure if the run without Chrono Field was going to make it that far in this tournament, so I figured to keep things more fair, I would just upgrade enemy health and attack level skips equally in both runs. You'll also notice that right off the bat, I don't have a lot of my ultimate weapons turned on. I usually keep things like Chain Lightning and Smart Missiles turned off until a little later in the tournament, and this is mostly just so I can get a few weaker enemies to hit my tower and help charge up Berserk for me before they start doing serious damage to my tower. I'll usually wait until I have somewhere around 10 trillion damage absorbed with Berserk before I start turning my other ultimate weapons back on. After that, I'll usually just turn them back one at a time as I start noticing enemies getting closer and closer to hitting my tower, or even getting actual hits on it. I could turn them all back at one time, but I find that by turning them on one at a time as I need them, it helps me get a better feel for how strong the enemies are and how close I'm getting to the end of my tournament run. Otherwise, it'll kind of just feel like smooth sailing until a bunch of enemies hit my tower out of nowhere and one-shot it, and I don't have a chance to activate Nuke, Missile Barrage, or anything like that. But yeah, the beginning of my runs basically starts with me having all of my damage ultimate weapons off and just pumping cash into enemy level skips. Then I'll slowly turn them back on as enemies get more and more threatening. Once I have them all on and enemies are still looking threatening, I'll go in and max out the rest of my workshop stats. And then once I really start getting worried about enemies hitting me and getting rid of second wind, I'll go into my cards, I'll take off the cash and free upgrades cards, and I'll replace those with something that can help me more towards the end of my tournament run. So the battle conditions for this tournament were Death Ray Resistance, Plasma Cannon Resistance, Protector's Ultimate, Basics Ultimate, Ranged Ultimate, Energy Shields Down, and more bosses. Honestly, most of these aren't that bad. Death Ray Resistance doesn't affect me almost at all. Plasma Cannon Resistance just makes it a little bit more difficult to deal with bosses. Basics Ultimate just makes it so basic enemies have a chance to spawn as other enemy types. This one can be scary if they start spawning as bosses, but I don't usually make it far enough in the tournaments for that to be much of a concern. Energy Shields Down just makes it so energy shields take a longer time to recharge, and then more bosses is just the battle condition you get in every Legends League tournament, where you get bosses every 6 waves instead of 10. But the two battle conditions I was really worried about were Protector's Ultimate and Ranged Ultimate. Protector's Ultimate gives Protectors an ability that goes off every 300 seconds on a cooldown, and the duration of the ability slowly goes up as you get to further and further waves in the tournament. When this ability goes off, it makes it so Protectors give themselves and any other enemies that are in their little Protector bubble knockback, shockwave, and black hole immunity. This one basically means that whenever that ability goes off, all of my crowd control, besides for Chrono Field, become completely useless against enemies, and I have to just try and kill them before they get within range of my tower. Ranged ultimates, on the other hand, just have an ability that makes it so whenever they hit your tower, they disable it from attacking for a certain amount of time, and that amount of time slowly goes up as you make it further and further in the tournament. This one's actually scary for two different reasons. The first one being that all it takes is one ranged enemy to hit your tower, and it can chain into a bunch of other ranged enemies hitting your tower. And a lot of times, just a single hit from a ranged ultimate will lead to you dying or triggering one of your abilities. The other reason they're scary is that because they're ultimate enemies, they get a lot of the same immunities that elite enemies do, which means they can't be affected by Black Hole. Normally in my tournament runs, since I have 100% uptime on Black Hole, the only enemies that I have to worry about are bosses and elite enemies. Everything else just gets permanently trapped in Black Hole and slowly killed off by Black Hole damage. But when you add something like ranged ultimates to the mix, it means that there are a lot more enemies I have to deal with, and it can get pretty scary towards the end of a tournament run when you have like 8 ranged enemies all on the edge of your tower. You're trying to keep them back with knockback, and all it takes is a single one of them getting one shot off on your tower to end your run. These two ultimate conditions together are especially lethal, because if a protector's ability goes off and it starts walking a whole group of ranged ultimate enemies right up to your tower, you have such a small amount of time to try and kill them before they're within shooting range of your tower and can just take you out. So overall, the battle conditions for this tournament were pretty scary, and definitely something I had to be mindful of coming into this tournament. So already you can see that in the run without Chrono Field, I'm taking more damage. It's currently at a little over 6 trillion damage, while the run with Chrono Field has only taken around 600 billion. This isn't a bad thing right now, but it does mean that in the run without Chrono Field, I'm taking quite a few more hits. These tournament runs were a little under an hour each, so for the sake of not making you sit through that all, I'm just going to fast forward things, and I'll pause whenever anything interesting happens or if there's anything that I want to comment on. Alright, so we're here at wave 100 now. As you can see, on the run without Chrono Field, I've already had to turn on Spotlight Missiles and Smart Missiles, and I'm upgrading the workshop stats now because I'm still taking hits. On the run with Chrono Field, I've only turned on Spotlight Missiles so far, and we've been cruising since then without taking any additional hits. At this point, I really didn't need to upgrade the workshop stats on the run with Chrono Field, and I could have just kept upgrading enemy level skips. But I felt like for the sake of this video, I should try and keep things as close to the same as possible between the two runs as I can. For the most part, both runs are handling the enemies fine at this point, but you can definitely tell that the run without Chrono Field is having a tougher time keeping enemies away from it, especially those ranged ultimate enemies, which you can see constantly being bounced back from the tower range line. So here at wave 150 now. The run with Chrono Field finally starts to take a few hits, and we ended up turning smart missiles on. Over in the run without Chrono Field, you can see that we've already turned all of the ultimate weapons on, but we're still taking quite a bit of damage. So at this point in the run, it's probably about time for me to swap the cash and free up cards out for something that's a little bit more useful. Alright, so we're at wave 200 now, and I think that this is where you're really going to start to see the difference that Chrono Field can make to your build. You can see over in the run with Chrono Field, we finally took another hit, so I decided to turn the rest of my ultimate weapons on, and it's pretty much been smooth sailing from that point on. But over in the run without Chrono Field, we've already turned all the ultimate weapons on, we've swapped out my cards, and we're still taking hits from the majority of bosses. At this point, there's not a whole lot more I can do to draw the run out, so it's just going to be a matter of seeing how long until the boss is able to break down my wall. Now, once that finally happens, I do still have quite a few tools to keep me alive for a few more waves. In order to actually hit my tower, the boss is going to have to get through all my inner landmines. I still have the nuke card, I still have missile barrage, demon mode, second wind, and both of my energy shield charges. So I can still make it quite a ways even once my wall does go down. So we're at wave 250 now. The run without Chrono Field finally lost the wall around wave 241. If you look at the background gameplay, you can actually see that right here at wave 251 is the point where the run without Chrono Field finally lost its first energy shield charge, and the run with Chrono Field is finally taking its first big hit since enabling Chain Lightning. Now, something to note is that both runs here are going to lose the wall at a pretty similar wave count, and this is mostly to do with the fact that the enemies are just doing so much damage at this point that they can kill the wall in 2 to 3 hits. It's important to note that even though the wall went down at a pretty similar time on both runs, the run with Chrono Field is taking quite a few less hits overall, which is going to matter quite a lot once the enemy's damage gets high enough to kill us in one hit. Alright everyone, as we get close to the end of the tournament here, I'm gonna slow things down just so you can see the last few waves of gameplay and how everything went. I do have to add that I unfortunately lost the footage for the last few waves on the Chrono Field run. I ended up actually having to record this tournament on my phone, since I wasn't at home when I did my tournament runs, and I can only screen record about 50 waves worth of gameplay footage from my phone at a time without the footage getting corrupted. But I was so focused on the tournament that I forgot to pause the recording when I got to 350 waves and then started again, which means all my footage for the last 66 waves or so got corrupted. I'm editing this video about a week after I actually did the tournament runs, so I didn't realize that the footage had gotten corrupted until just barely. So I'm really sorry about that to anyone who wanted to see the last few waves of the tournament. Luckily, I did take a screenshot of my results at the end of both runs, so I'll include that here at the end of the video and put timestamps in for my best guesses when all my abilities and stuff went off. Again, really sorry about that. There's just unfortunately nothing I can do about it at this point, so if you guys end up liking this video, let me know in the comments section and I can try and do some more similar videos in the future with my entire tournament runs recorded. But for now, let's get back into these two tournament runs and how they went. So the run without Chrono Field ended up making it to wave 305, while the run with Chrono Field ended up making it to wave 367. It means the run with Chrono Field made it 62 waves further in total. And according to the Tower Enemy Stats website, at Legends Wave 305, the enemies have 272 sextillion HP and 896 trillion damage, while at Legends Wave 365, the enemies have 938 sextillion HP and 1.74 quadrillion damage. This means that, in total, Chrono Field was able to take us to the point in the run where enemies had a little under 4 times as much health and 2 times as much damage. Now, those numbers aren't accounting for enemy level skips, but throughout the tournament run, both runs had a pretty similar amount of level skips, so these numbers should be relatively accurate. And I also want to point out that I do have a 75% speed reduction Chrono Field with level 2 Chrono Field Plus, so most people investing in Chrono Field won't see these kind of results right off the bat, but it is still a very powerful ultimate weapon nonetheless, and you'll especially be able to notice the effect when there's battle conditions like enemy speed up, fast ultimates, and other things like that. Because when you have battle conditions like that, enemies go from your tower range line to your tower in the matter of a couple of frames, and it's nearly impossible to deal with them without a massive amount of crowd control. I also wanted to note that I just recently got my Dimension Core to Ancestral, and I was able to roll the Ancestral submodule effect for Chrono Field speed reduction on that. It has had an absolutely huge effect on my tournament runs, and I've been getting 50 to 100 more waves than I usually would since I got that. And for those of you that don't know, 90% speed reduction is the maximum that you can get with Chrono Field, which is what I have on it now. So if you'd like to see another video similar to this one, but comparing no Chrono Field with a maximum speed reduction Chrono Field, let me know in the comments section, and I'll see if that's something that I can get recorded sometime soon. Anyways, I think that that's a pretty good place to wrap up the video, so I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you got something out of the video, learned something new, or just enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I am still a relatively new and really small channel, so every subscription or like on the video matters. And if you have any suggestions, requests, or just general questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I try to check those every day or two when I have the free time, so feel free to leave your comments there and I'll respond to them as soon as I get the chance. That's it, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.